Hey everyone, Joe Baker here with the Edit Bay, and tonight we're going to be taking a look at adding lens flares to your photographs. Lens flares are cool. I would compare lens flares to vignettes, in that they're hilariously overused, but still generally considered classy. They pop up in movies a lot, and people often will like to add them into their photographs. So I'm here in Photoshop right now, and Photoshop definitely has some limitations in the way of lens flares, as do many video editing apps. So I can show you a couple of quick ways to do this in Photoshop based on some tutorials that I've seen, but it's really limiting, and at best, it's a workaround. So I've got my background layer right here, and we'll kind of ignore this. To be quite honest, this is not really a great candidate for a lens flare. I think that adding a lens flare to this particular image would kind of take away from the subject of the image, but let me go ahead and show you how to do this. So I'm just going to take my background layer and duplicate it. And with layer duplicated, I can go up here to filter, go down here to render, and go to lens flare. Now with this right here, I can kind of choose exactly where I want the lens flare to be, and of course I'll put it on that light right there in the back. But this is very limiting. When I'm here on the on this layer, I can reduce the opacity a little bit, but that's about all I can do with this lens flare. I actually can't move the lens flare off of the light from this position right here. So if I go to V for my move tool, you can see that that's basically attached to the layer itself. So that is very limiting, and not to mention lens flares don't look like this at all. Looks really cheesy. Things are just not that symmetrical inside of a real lens flare. You don't get these perfect circles. Many of the elements in lens flares are asymmetrical and blurry and just kind of all over the place. So your best bet for a lens flare is probably to be using a third-party plugin. Red Giant makes one called Null Light Factory, and Video Copilot makes one called Optical Flares. And there's advantages to both. Null Light Factory by Red Giant is nice because of the way that their licensing works. Red Giant, if you purchase a license for their plugins, they'll allow you to install it in any host app you have that will support it. So in the case of Null Light Factory, you could install it into Premiere, After Effects, and Photoshop for one license fee. Whereas Video Copilot's Optical Flares is only After Effects plugin. The other option I have seen with this particular lens flare right here in Photoshop is, I'm going to go ahead and drag this down here, duplicate my background layer, and then with that duplicate, hit Shift Backspace, fill it with black, and then come down here and reapply the lens flare, set the blending mode to screen, and that will at least give you the ability to color correct and change the hue and saturation and stuff like that with the lens flare. Again, still not the best results because you're limited to those 4 little options within Photoshop. So let's take this over to After Effects because we'll get some better results over there. Now I will show you how to round trip the file from Photoshop to After Effects and then back to Photoshop. But to be honest, with the way that lens flares work, they occur in the lens. And so they really should be at the top of your stack anyway. So let's say this was a complicated composite and I had, say, 9 different layers. The lens flare is the one I would want to have on the top because it's going to be, again, happening last. It's going to be happening in the lens. But if for whatever reason you wanted to round trip it back, I'll go ahead and show you how to do that. But since it happens at the top of your stack, one thing to do is to simply merge all of your layers or simply save out a JPEG or a PNG or whatever, send that to After Effects, add your lens flare, and then simply save an image file right out of After Effects. But let's go check out After Effects really quick. I've got the same image, and in After Effects I'm going to create a new layer, a new solid layer by hitting Control-Y, and we'll just call this Optical Flares. Go to Effect, Video Copilot, Optical Flares. And just so I can see what I'm doing inside of Optical Flares, I need to designate a background layer. So I'm going to say that that is my background layer, so that when I open up After Effects' own UI, I can come over to here, Show Background, and I can actually see what I'm doing. Now, by default, it just gives me this cheesy little lens flare. I can kind of figure out where I want it. I could get into tons of tutorials just on this plugin alone, but just for the time being, I'm going to go ahead and throw one of these on here, say OK, just to show you how this looks. And we'll set the blending mode to screen. That back up here. Yeah, I mentioned earlier, this photo really isn't the best candidate for a lens flare, so I tried to stay subtle with this. But as you can see, it's a much nicer looking lens flare, and you can see also from the user interface of Optical Flares, you've got a ton of options within there. It really is a better way to go. Now, if I was happy with this image and I'm ready to go, all I need to do is go up to Composition, Save Frame As, Photoshop Layers, save it, whatever I would like to do. In fact, I'm going to add this OF tutorial, save it out, and then I could come back to Photoshop and open up that same file. Whoops. And as you can see, that retains my optical flares layer over here that I can toggle on and off and see. It's its own layer, so I can change the blending mode, change the opacity, do whatever I'd like. There is no shortage of good tutorials out there for how to create really complicated, intricate lens flares within Photoshop, just using Photoshop's built-in tools. But we live in the age of work smarter, not harder. And again, I really do think the best bet for lens flares this day and age is just to use a third-party plugin. You've got Video Copilot's optical flares, you've got Red Giant's Knoll Light Factory, which is very similar. I definitely think you guys should check those out. If you have any questions, go ahead and leave a comment in the box below. Don't forget to subscribe. I'll see you next time.